Hi everyone, this is Tanya from Flying Dog Studio. Thanks so much for joining me. In this video, I'm going to be working with the Derwent Inktense Watercolor Pencils. And as you can see, I have already drawn out the picture I'll be working with. This was taken from a photograph that I took in our backyard of some sassafras trees. I've already drawn it out and lined it with some micron pens, a light gray and a dark gray. I used the dark gray for the front leaves and the light gray for the background leaves, and that is a .01 tip. I also have the Winsor & Newton mop brush and the Royal & Langnickel size 8 round from their Zen series. As you can see, I have a cup of water. Normally I have 2, but we're only going to need 1 because I'm not going to be rinsing the brush and then needing clear water for mixing, because we're not going to use that mixing palette. Instead, we're going to take those Inktense pencils and we're going to be mixing colors right on the page. As you can see, I am doing just a base coat of yellow. I've used the yellow and covered the entire page, and I'm going to come back with that Winsor & Newton mop brush and get a good saturation of water and spread those colors around. Now, it was kind of shocking because they are very intense, Inktense, and it was super bright on the page, a little brighter than I needed. When I took the reference photograph, I took it in the evening. It was getting kind of dusky dark and the sun was starting to set, and it gave the leaves that golden color. So this was taken in the fall. I took it not long ago and we still had leaves on those trees. So everything had that golden look to it except for the background. It only had a little bit, but I went ahead and gave a good yellow background to everything. And like I said, it was a little intense. So I have a paper towel here. You're going to see me dab this, get a little bit of color off in the center, just a little bit, just patting it. Never drag, always pat if you're going to take watercolor off with a paper towel. And then I'm just smoothing everything back out with that water brush. At this point, I went ahead and let that paper set until it was completely dry, and now I'm going to work on the background. As you can see, I have a leaf green that is like the darker green in the set, and then the brown that's called bark. So the background, when you're taking a photo of something up close, and these leaves were close, the background that I could see was blurred out. So that's what you see in a photograph, and we want to reproduce that on here. I'm not following the photograph exactly as far as pattern on things where the colors are laid out, but I am following it as far as color. So I'm using the darker green and that bark brown, and I'm coming in and just laying little swatches of color, and you're going to see me do that between all of these leaves. I have already swatched these colors out in a previous video, and I will link that down below. So I know how they're going to look on paper, and I know which colors are going to be the strongest and which are going to be some of the lighter colors and how they react together. So I happen to know that the bark brown and the leaf green are going to be some of the darker colors. So I'm putting these down super lightly. You're going to see me do this through the entire piece because, again, this is an experiment, and I am working on, I should have mentioned this earlier, I am working on 100% cotton paper that is cold pressed. So it is textured, and you're going to be seeing that now as I'm starting to lay down these darker colors. These colors I'm wanting to add on top of. So I don't want to go too dark, and I'm not certain how this is going to work out for me. I am certainly not an expert at working with these Derwent pencils. As a matter of fact, this is the first time I have ever done a piece with the Derwent pencils. So as I said previously, this is an experiment. We are going to be learning how to layer, and we're going to see how they work out on a rough paper. I will also be doing a smooth paper so that you can see how they work on smooth paper. All we're wanting to do here is get a good base color between all of these leaves, and then we'll come back in some later videos and add some more colors on top. We will add some green on top of this, but I'm going to get my good base colors in right now. If you're a colored pencil artist and you're thinking about doing some watercolor, I do recommend getting watercolor pencils, and I do like these Derwent pencils. And you'll notice that I'm not coloring as you normally would with a colored pencil, where you move in a circular motion and be very careful not to overlap. And I'm also not sharpening my pencil. That pencil is getting kind of dull on the end, and a lot of my pencils do, especially the poppy red. But all we want to do is just to distribute some color on the surface. Because this is a rough paper, and as I've said in a previous video when I did the swatching on these, I'm doing this on cold press, and colored pencil always travels across the hills and not the valleys. That's what I always tell my students. Just remember, if you have a rough paper, it's going to travel on the hills and distribute on the hills, but not in the valleys. The good thing about using a watercolor pencil is that you come back with the water and you can then distribute that color from the hills down into the valleys. The only trick is that you have to use that circular motion that you would normally use when you're coloring with a colored pencil. You're going to have to use that when you use your brush. And you can see that I do that in quite a few areas. My brush is moving in a circular motion. That really helps to break up that ink pigment and get it down into those valleys and mix the colors together. So it distributes the color much, much better for you. So if you're thinking about getting into watercolor, or you're looking for some type of watercolor to put underneath your colored pencil, if you're a colored pencil artist, then I do recommend watercolor pencils. I do also recommend that you try not only Derwent, because these are ink based, but you try I should say regular colored pencil that is not ink based, and see how you like the pigments on those, because these remind me very much of liquid watercolor, which stains and is very dark and has a different pigment base than regular watercolor straight out of a pan or a tube. So I would recommend experimenting with those. I am going to experiment with other things on this channel. So if you want to know how those work and you don't want to spend the money doing it yourself, then just tune back in, and some future videos will be checking those things out. Because I am working on cold press paper, it does dry fairly quickly. I have now picked up the apple green, and this is completely dry. I can't remember actually if I used a hair dryer on this or if I let it dry by itself, because like I said, it dries fairly quickly. But I'm putting down the apple green on a dry surface. You can use these pencils on a wet surface and color on top of a wet area, but in my opinion, I think you run the risk of damaging your paper. So I'd be very careful before I did that. Now, I wanted to see how a lighter color would layer on top of the darker colors, and it did really, really well. You can see how it's very vibrant, and that was what I was hoping for, really, really hoping for. And I'll be layering some more colors on here, because this is actually brighter than what we want for our picture. So I'm going to come back with some other colors on top, but since it is an experiment, we're going to try that out. And I did, and I think it turned out really well. If you are using colored pencils and you're doing just colored pencil art, I always started with the dark colors and then layered the lights on top. And everybody does it a different way. In some cases, you would want to put the light color down first and then put the dark on top. But in this case, I did it the other way. Now I am looking down at the bottom, and I am taking a look at the dark, it's either called dark or deep indigo. But I know that I want the bottom darker because that was more in shadow. So I took a look at my swatching. That's why it's so important to swatch your colors first. I took a look at it to see exactly how dark that got because I knew some of my colors were extremely strong, and this was one of those that I was going to need to go lighter on so that it did not overtake the colors I already had. So I'm coloring very lightly and only in a few areas, and you will see when I add the water to that it's going to be about the same intensity as the colors I already have on the page. All right, our background is completely dry, and I want to start on those leaves. And I do not tape my paper down, so I know that probably drives some people nuts, but I like to work all the way to the edge, so you'll see me bending it throughout to get it back into shape. So we are working with tangerine and poppy red, and I am picking up the apple green and then that sun yellow one more time, because I do have the good base of sun yellow, but there were a couple of the leaves that had not completely turned. If you've never seen a sassafras tree, sometimes and I'm also getting that dark indigo back out as well. Sometimes sassafras leaves, the entire tree will have some deep purple or some red, some orange, some yellow and green all at the same time on the tree. They're beautiful trees in the fall. So that's what I found on this one. I thought I have to take a picture because that would be perfect for those Derwent pencils. And it was. I absolutely loved it. So all we're going to do here is I have picked up the tangerine and I'm looking for all of the leaves that I want that tangerine base on. Now I could actually have, when I finish this part, put some shadows in and left it really light. But these are Inktense pencils. So I wanted to see how dark we could actually go before I absolutely hated it. So I like my watercolors light. I don't like them too dark, but I thought the name of these pencils, I just had to see really how much they would layer and how they would work. So you're going to get to see that here. Now again, I'm not worried about them overlapping on the colors if I have it too dark in one area and too light in another, because once you pick up that water and spread it around, it really evens things out. And I don't know if you've noticed on some parts of this, I have done it and you'll see it again in other areas, but I can paint right here on this leaf, and if I wanted to pick that brush up and put that color elsewhere that I had not put any color down, you'll have enough pigment left in your brush that you can paint lightly in other areas that you haven't previously colored, and it will lay that pigment down. So basically all you're going to see me doing in this part is putting the base colors down for all of these leaves and then letting each set dry before I come back and color leaves next to it. But as I said previously, it does dry fairly quickly. I do keep a hair dryer at hand, so if I'm wanting to work quickly, I can go ahead and dry those areas and then come back and color the leaves next to them. As I'm planning out the colors for all of these leaves, I am going to come back to my swatching guide and take a look at what colors work best together so I'll know how to layer. The particular leaf I'm working on right now actually has some purple in it, so I'm going to put the red down first, and then I'm going to add that deep indigo later on top. Once it is dry, I will add some of that on top. And you can tell that they really work well together. Now, those are two colors on my swatching blocks that were equally strong. So I had to be very careful to go like a 50-50 lay down on color. I couldn't be too heavy with one and too light with the other. So that is something that I think is going to take a little bit of practice as I'm working through these pieces in the future, but it's really it's a little bit of a learning curve, but it's not too bad. As we are starting to lay down the final colors on here, we are coming to the end of the video. And you have noticed, I'm sure, that I took out the green and the blue, and I will be using those in part 2. So I thought that once I got all of the main base colors down, it would be a good idea just sort of end the video there so that we can come back once everything is dry and we can see how all of those colors will lay down together. And if you work with Inktense pencils, please feel free to put any suggestions down in in the comments, because I want this to be a community where we all help one another and learn. And this is definitely something that I am learning on right now. And I'm enjoying the process. But do put suggestions down below if you have some insights on those. I always love the comments. And as usual, I appreciate your watching and joining me on this journey. I will have 3 more parts to this particular piece, and then I will have some upcoming videos, and I hope also, as I said earlier, to be doing another piece, possibly this one again, but another piece on some smooth paper. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.